It's great. We've got three amazing people here. And I wasn't here for the introductions. I don't know if they got introduced, but I've got my own relationships with this group. That's, it's three of the, to me, top people in Europe. And maybe I'll give a quick introduction, and then we'll fire away. Osdoit from MD Start, probably one of the brightest minds in Europe right now around early stage med tech. She really, really gets it when it comes to understanding all the things and all the complications around early stage med tech, and she's innovating at MD Start. And Pepe, probably one of the most diplomatic board members you'll find. I think he's able to create cohesion and drive a team together. And then you've got Oern, who's been part of 20 boards.
23.
And about 10 of them he's been board chair. He's driven multiple exits. Some of them we call a unicorn. So if, I had to look this up. And so unicorn, if you don't know, means $1 billion exit. And those are what everybody, well, venture people love to get, or everybody loves to get a unicorn. And Oern got a triple unicorn with Pulmonx when they went public. Oern's probably best claim to fame is this drive towards a goal of an exit and creating value. He becomes relentless, just like he was in his younger days when he was a famous athlete.
Oh,
so,
well. Thank you.
So to start it out, we have Mary somewhere out there. Okay, so Mary's right there. We would like this to be interactive. So we want you to come forward with questions. Just kind of make eye contact with Mary. She'll bring a mic by, and feel free to fire away. So we've got some different content areas that we're going to cover, and interject any time you feel like you've got a really good question for them. We're going to start out with more about board construction and how boards are put together. And we're going to start out with Anne, and maybe talk to us a bit about, sometimes when people think of boards, they think of something bad, like I've got to report to the board can be bad. Tell us a little bit about how you see boards and why they're just a fantastic asset to a CEO in a company.
Thank you, Roger, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I think one of the fundamental misconceptions CEOs can have is that they don't want to be bothered by their board, right? They'd rather not have a board at all, or have a very easygoing board, which will just be a place where once a quarter you just get decisions minuted, and that's it. You don't have to get into a lot of discussions. And I think it's actually really important for CEOs to realize that the boards they will be building, or they could be building, is actually an extended part of their team. And you have a lot of influence in, of course, how you assemble it. And in how you manage it. You can actually get these people to do work for you, and you should be doing that. Because, again, they will be your sparring partners on a number of things that your actual team, operational team, cannot give you. And so, when I hear young CEOs say, "Hey, do I really have to bother about a board? And should I be thinking about a board?" I think there's a huge opportunity there to be seized, and to be proactively engaging with.
Yeah, and a strong board is a good board. A strong
board is a good board. It's a board that has a lot of experience and expertise. It's a board that says things and just doesn't just sit there and listen in. It's a board where you have dialogue and discussion. It's a mix of usually investors and operators, which is really helpful to drive and help through some of your challenges. It's a mix of people who have a vested interest and independent people usually, and so it takes an effort to put this group together and manage those dynamics. But ultimately, the idea is that you will be leveraging that, very often in the life of the company.
Yeah, good, good. So, Oern, back us up to the big picture of a board that, because you've seen so many exits, what's the big picture look like of a board that seems to be driving towards a successful exit versus other boards that, I don't know, I don't want to say spin their wheels, but
Yeah.
what's different about it?
Well, if you take a big company, listed company, they would say it's corporate governance. But for smaller companies, I would say the board is, very much should co-own the strategy with the CEO. And the board should actually look out for all stakeholders. And that's sort of, when you have looking out for all the stakeholders, you kind of try to build a higher level of consensus, higher value for all. And building upon what Anne just said, I think, a chairman, for example, should, really be, complementary with the CEO and really help out, for example, introductions to people that have done things before, very good consultants like an HR consultant and any other person like RBrooks, for example, or, typical people that have seen the movies before. They know what works. And, it's good to learn from mistakes, but it's even better to avoid them. Yeah. And that's where the board comes in, one thing.
Well, once you keep going with that, once there's, most boards, early stage boards, seems like they do not have an independent board chair. So the group functions of investors, sometimes there's an independent there. But what's your experience? Once the company has an independent chair, how does it operate differently than without one? And what are the problems that seem to happen frequently when you don't have a good independent board chair?
Well, as I said, the board should be looking out for all stakeholders. If you have investor representatives, well, they're paid for by the fund, they tend to be biased. So it is very helpful to have an independent to try to orchestrate that in the right direction. So that's one key principle. And I think that's the key principle, actually.
Okay. And Pepe, who's got all sorts of global experiences, I'm thinking specifically, especially of companies in Europe, medtech companies in Europe. Tell me about the importance, or does it matter if they have? Can they have a European-centric board? Should they have a global board? What's the importance or difference between those?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here with this group of friends. I think today there is really no regional company. Even if you're in Europe, you're in the US, you're in Israel, you have to think global. And so the challenge with a European-centric board is that they're missing the views of how does it look to be if you would live in the United States. And I take it even one step further, what it is to live in Asia, or what it is to live in Japan or China, and even Asia is very different from country to country. So when people like me that had an opportunity to live in many countries, when I was in Europe, I was very European-centric. When I was in the US, Europe was far away. And when I was living in Singapore, Asia was actually the most important thing that you could think of. And so now the question is, how do you transmit that to the mindset of doesn't need to be junior CEO or mid-sized company CEO that has not had those experiences. So then you have a way to complement those experiences by either the chairman or bringing some selective mix of board members. Now, in the smaller companies, the investors decide who the board member is. Sometimes you have a chance to influence because inside the investment, there are different partners and investment teams. So you can also say, listen, perhaps this partner is better suited for this board, or this observer is better suited compared to others. But at the end, you have a little bit less as a CEO, you have less ability to influence that, and then plays the role of independent board members. So a very centric European board, you will probably want to have an American. If you're thinking of expansion in China, you would want to have some angle there. So at the end, it's looking for the right balance of experiences.
And
Definitely
if I
very
may
important.
build on that, all startups in the medtech field should think they are global from day one.
Yeah.
And then you need to think accordingly. So,
And even if the strategy, let's say, you think about a company, right now more and more companies are starting with a US-centric strategy because the European MDR system is still unknown, still a little bit on the unknown. And until that's settled, more and more companies are starting with an EFS. And they are European-based companies. Okay, so how do you approach a European-centric? It doesn't need to be based in the US. Maybe you evolve to move to US in the future, but you definitely need to have the mindset.
Yeah. And just to build on, a lot of people are concerned about MDR here in Europe, but if you keep your focus, like Oern said, you're a global company.
Yeah.
You build a global organization. Your headquarters is here in Europe, and you just pull different levers. So it's going to be all right.
One thing that, for example, one of the companies that I'm involved with is from Israel. And Israel, as we all know, is really a center of innovation, but it's also small and it's far away. And you have the CEO, very young CEO, who lived the beginning of the company, and then when the company moved to the US pivotal trial, she moved to New York. She had lived for 2 years in New York. Now the trial is finished. Now she needs to think about expanding commercialization in Europe. So she moved back to Israel and hired some people in Europe. So you also need to have the flexibility that is not just one central area and then you need to live there.
Yeah.
absolutely. I have, for example, one successful company which is French, and France, come up with a lot of innovation, as we know. One of the best innovative companies in the world, in my opinion. There we have the CEO based in Boston and the CFO based in Boston. The company is French.
And I would add that beyond the globality aspect, it's also the role of your board or one of their mandates to help you think bigger. I as a CEO of Moon Surgical, I have my lead investor, and sitting on the board tell me, my job is to add 1 0 to your ambition, and I will always be pushing for that extra zero. And I think that's another aspect. It's having people who are, very much committed and engaged to what you're doing, but also, not into the daily difficulties and challenges, and can keep you focused on the ultimate target, and help you, basically maintain that ambition and grow it over the years.
Yeah. So, Anne, why don't you build on that a little bit around the role of the independent director? And it really feels like most Series A companies I see don't have a independent director. How can that be changed, and what should the CEO out raising funds be thinking about as it relates to an independent, and how do they get there?
That's a great question, and I think the CEO can be very proactive with that. As a CEO, I'd rather pick my independent board member than have it imposed by incoming investors or have it, suggested. And I think, if you're the CEO of a company and you turn to your board and say, hey, we're going to find this incredible addition to the board who has, this and that skill set which will complement yours, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't agree, frankly. And I think it's a sign of maturity from the CEO to be doing that. I would encourage all CEOs to actually do that before they start fundraising massively, because it will help them, basically have someone to discuss with during the challenging times around fundraising. It will help, I think, with their slide deck. I mean, having someone independent is someone the investors can call for feedback on the CEO and on the company. And you'll have also, I think, more latitude in who you pick.
And do they need to put it in the term sheet about this desires, so it's built in right away?
If you're looking for an independent board member or several at the time you're fundraising, yes, it should absolutely be discussed and in the term sheet for one very simple reason, which is that there's an equity grant to the independent board members, and so a dilutive effect, which is well worth the addition. But it can happen at any time during the life of the company. Again, I think between two fundraising events, you can turn to your board and suggest that you need an additional skill set, and anyone reasonable would agree with that.
Yeah, if I may build on that, because clearly, as I said, I think the chairman and the CEO should be complementary, and clearly a chairman can, help a lot in fundraising. Trust, relationship, like we heard from Antoine yesterday, you call certain people, and that's what a good chairman does. You reach out to this, and that, and then suddenly you have very strong introduction when you come in as CEO, and that typically helps significantly.
One was going to add on the independent that, sometimes there is a little bit of fear when the CEO proposes an independent. Is that his friend, her friend? Are we going to change the dynamics of the board? So when I was a CEO and I identified that there was a need for independent board members, I think it's good to start from the concept of, it's not that I don't want I want John in my board. No, I need this skill. I need a product skill or a product development skill or an R&D skill or something that complements me and my team. And here are 2 or 3 potential candidates, but it's not like I have my favorite. I also have the experience of CEOs, and I have a couple of examples where the CEO would like to have one person in the board, and that automatically somehow push the investors out, because they're trying to think about all kind of combinations of preferred person, not necessarily looking after the company, but maybe looking after the CEO. So I think thinking about how you do that smartly, identify what are the skill sets that are missing, get alignment from the chairman, and propose it to the board as, we need to have this.
Yeah.
And now here's a few names. Maybe you have other names. Let's bring the skill, not just focus on one particular person.
So,
That goes
Anne,
a
why
long
don't you
way.
tell us the cardiologue story where I worked with Anne to help the CEO and do something fun on the board. Tell us about that and its implications to the company.
Sure. So I was very fortunate to be an angel investor and long-standing board member at a company called Cardiologues, which is a French company doing an AI solution for ECG interpretation. It's a company that was recently acquired by Philips and is currently being integrated. And I had different positions on this board. Initially represented the angel, stayed on when traditional VCs came on, because I was a known entity, I guess, and they liked it. And then ultimately switched to representing the management team and the founders, because I was pretty close with them. So I was together with the CEO representing the founders. And we raised money. We got a syndicate of VCs. It was not unusual now to have both medtech and tech investors, because it's a digital health company, and that in itself creates, I think, some challenges in terms of alignment and expectations. But we had nobody on the board from the US, and that was a clear, miss. And we had nobody on the board who was an operational person. So I discussed with the CEO, and we agreed that it would be very beneficial to the company to find someone, to add someone, and it was not in the term sheet, it was not in the shareholders' agreement. So we went to the board, to the investors, which was only investors, and said, hey, we want to do that. Do you agree in principle? And we'll have to issue additional options, and this is all going to be fine because we'll find someone great. And they agreed. I think they were very open to finding, guidance, in the US, to having also people who had done it before. The tech investors were also, I think, particularly interested in having industry experts on board. And we reached out to you, right, and launched a search. And the search process was very structured. As always, we interviewed a number of people. And we ended up with 3 fantastic candidates, right? very diverse skill sets, but all relevant in a way to the company, and all had a good fit with the CEO. And you know, we were stuck there. We were like, okay, we really like these guys. I mean, especially 2 out of the 3, right? So what do we do? And so we went back to the board and said, hey, like, you know, we actually found 2 independent board members, you know, and our suggestion is that we bring both of them on because, you know, they will add this and this other guys will add that. And they were very open, of course, interviewed all these, you know, candidates, and we did bring on 2 additional board members. And, you know, it dramatically changed the face of the company. It completely changed the ambition. I mean, literally adding 1 0 and thinking globally, challenging the CEO a lot on the strategy, but in a good way, in a very, you know, constructive and professional way. And we then embarked on this dual path between a B round and an exit, and you know, the company was ultimately acquired by Philips. But we would never have, you know, gone through that process and be there today without these 2 people on the board. Yeah.
Wow, it's great to hear.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of, you know, having been an operator for 30 plus years, when I joined my first board, and actually I was together with Anne, we were like, okay, what's my role here? And very quickly you realize that the CEO sometimes can be pretty lonely out there because he wants to sort of double check that everything he's doing is in the right direction. And if he talks to the investors in a very sort of open way, he may be seen as a weakness. And so he wants to have kind of like partners in crime. And I think the two people that best can achieve that is the independent chair, because it's like, listen, what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we're going to make sure that I know exactly what's going on, and I can help you, and you can help me, and then we'll get the best way to the board.
Yeah.
And the second one is the independent director. So when you say challenge, I think the independent director should be, personality-wise also, should be in a way that provide help, and you say diplomatic way, and can be challenging, but never seen as the fear from the board. Otherwise, the CEO will close, and then at the end, we can all kind of dynamics. But if it's the right personality with the right set of experiences, it just amplify what the CEO wants to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think to be a CEO is actually a lonely job.
Yeah.
And it's important to be aware of that, because you need motivation, you need feedback, you need the sense of support. Starting off with what Anne said, you know, many CEOs don't want a board, it's kind of a problem, etc. No, we need to turn it around. And just one practice that I like to introduce is that we have a non-executive session after every board meeting, so that all the directors can give their feedback, and then I, for example, when I share that feedback with the CEO, and you know, and that's typically supportive and, you know, constructive feedback if there's something that needs to be changed, and that, you know, takes the tension down. And then suddenly the board becomes something really supportive, something very helpful, and then appreciated.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna look to the audience. Is anybody working on a good question for this group?
I was going to add something on the board that I share with Pepe, which is, you know, I've seen Pepe help the CEO deliver difficult decisions, right? I mean, and that's what you need to do as a chairman. I mean, as a CEO, you are stuck between conflicting priorities and interests. You're trying to keep your team happy, your different management members happy. You're trying to keep your investors happy. And, you know, some of these decisions are tricky. And so, you know, you are here to help him, like, get past that and provide an incredible relief. Because he knows he's backed in these decisions, and And it's the right thing to do for the company. It's not the right thing to do for A or Z or specific people.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great value add from the board. Yeah.
And you know, in some places, I've been in a couple of boards where there were no chair, historical, we don't need it. And I say, well, maybe, you know, if I'm independent, why don't we do sort of like a interim chair to see the value, or non-written chair, but do the job of the chair, and then suddenly, very quickly, I think we need a chair. And that happens already in 2 boards. That they were like, also another thing is, in US companies, sometimes there are no chairs, unless they're public and they need to have a chair. And sometimes you have the lead investor becoming the chair. I don't think that's healthy, because then it becomes too much biased.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's a little bit of you drink your own Kool-Aid. You know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And sometimes the answer is not what the lead investor says, it's a combination of other things. And so driving this decision to incorporate an independent chair, I'm talking a lot about the chair, sometimes you have to go step by step because people need to be convinced. And maybe the concept of having an interim chair while you're looking for the right chair, because it takes time. I have seen this in 2 boards, and at the end now we have a good chair, independent chair, that is really complementary to the CEO.
Yeah. Why don't you elaborate on something we spoke about that board chair and the importance of not taking sides, but yet still driving results.
Right.
Well,
I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, and you cannot say names because they might be here or this is recorded, so you have to be very careful here. But there is an element of a role of an independent. I'm in a board where investors are not aligned. They're not, just not aligned. I don't know ultimately who will be right or wrong. And I helped we brought an independent chair. In my first speech, I was the interim chair, so it was one of these things. And, you know, interesting enough, although I'm not truly independent in that company, the CEO is looking at me as independent because I was behaving independent. And that's why I was interim chair. When I brought the real chair, I said, man, you have a problem, we have a problem, because there are some things that need to be fixed here. The worst thing you can do is to choose camps. Because even if we believe we are right and the other group believes it's not right, your job is to kind of like bring a solution to the table. And I can help you there, but at the end of the day, your role as an independent chair is critical. Fast track 3 months. Now the pressure cook is down, the temperature is down. Not 100% aligned, but we are 70% aligned, which is good enough for the CEO not to have to worry about the board. And that has only been possible because there was a chair, because it was an independent chair, and because he has been played both parts. Okay. It's an example.
Yeah. Good.
You also have the other example where everything is a happy family and everybody is 100% aligned. And actually then, I think probably more the example that we're talking about, where my role as chair is more of really working with the CEO, because the board is aligned, and there you spend more energy with the CEO and also with the external parties.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. You know, I'm in a company where we have, of course, very important discussions with our most critical supplier, right? And so we're establishing a master supplier agreement with these guys and negotiating, hard with them. At the same time, we are having strategic discussions about potentially taking ownership in that company and then potentially doing a structured deal over time. It's very hard to have one single person carrying both discussions with that supplier, right? Because again, there are conflicting interests between the 2 paths. And no matter what, you need the master supplier agreement in place, and you need to, basically negotiate transfer price on that. But you're also very interested in securing, potential structured deal down the way. So we have the CEO doing the MSA thing, the chairman doing the strategic discussions, and that's really the only way to move both forward in parallel. And I think some of these tactics are also only possible if you have the right board composition.
Yeah.
Well, let's move to exits. And
That's Oern.
say again.
That's Oern.
That's Oern. So,
Well,
what
You
can
have
the
the biggest
board
track
be?
record here on exits, yeah?
What can the board be doing behind the scenes or even in front of the scenes that can help drive to those exit points?
I'm sure there are lots of opinions about this topic. I personally have one thing that I like to do all the time. From day one to basically challenge the CEO and the board members and everybody to find a clear path to exit. Really, combining the knowledge of the, let's say, the strategic landscape, exactly the dynamics, how it works, what will not work, where is the kind of unmet need or opportunity, and know exactly where to put this particular value proposition that the companies represent. If you know that, that tends to align everyone, drive priorities, and then you get a focused action, which is good. I mean, think takes time. There will be a this and there will be a that, but I have found that if you have a very clear plan, that tends to drive to the value generation quicker. You should not only have one plan. You should have a plan B and
Plan B.
C and so on. And also the ones that are under your own control, like if, for example, when the IPO market tend to be open, you have that as a possibility. But a clear plan from day one, I think, is recommended.
Go ahead.
I've seen that also. Sometimes, you have companies that, and I have experience where, there's a company that you could see a standalone company, let's say has legs, and whether it gets acquired or whether it goes to an IPO, both are reasonable, good options. Then you also have the companies that you talk to the CEO at the beginning and say, what's your path? Oh, we're going to be an IPO. There's no way you're going to be an IPO. This is impossible. And if you're an IPO, it will be a failure because after the first quarter and the second quarter, you're going to have this glitch here, that glitch here. You're going to miss 2 quarters. You're gone in the third quarter. So a reality check of how that product fits in the space of the large market. Can it be both? Or is it a product that at the end needs a home? And if it needs a home, then the question is, it goes back to you, where is the universe of buyers? And how do you strategically, you're not over there like, hey, when are you going to buy me, right?
Yeah.
But there are ways to engage along the way in different capacities to, in a way, be on their radar. But I could be in your home, but I could also be in another home, and I'll be happy in both. And that creates also a little bit of a small tension that ultimately, when you understand who is your universe of buyers and how do you engage them. Also, another thing, for example, we're doing with one company, let's say you are in a cardiovascular space, the physicians would love your product. These physicians are also advisors to all of these potential buyers. So it doesn't make, it's not stupid so that you engage with the physicians that are going to put a word for you in the right room at the right time.
Exactly, influencing the right people. And I was thinking about last night at the conversation with Antoine. And if you look at investments that Sofinnova has made, but other venture people have made, they tend to go to people they trust, or people they trust come to them with something, and that influences them. And the same with buyers. I think the really good CEOs seem to find a way to figure out who the influence points are. And it's not necessarily business development. Keep business development up to date, but figure out the surgeon or the physician that influences them, and then get in front of them and win them over. and get them to whisper back to the company, and that's how the transactions tend to happen, right?
That's
Yeah,
critical.
perhaps I should make one qualifier to my original comment, because of course the company depends what kind of position the company is, and if it's broad, that's one thing, but if it's specific, it's another one. The best example I have is one where we co-founded a company. 2 years later, we sold it at 99x.
Yeah.
And then we knew exactly where to put it, and that's now Sapiens M3 at Edwards.
Yeah. Neat.
So 99x, assuming all earnouts, which may
Okay,
not
so I
happen,
think
but-
we got 1 minute left. Do we have any questions? We've got 1, 2.
2 questions. Any more?
Hello. Hi, that works. Malcolm Finley. I'm a Chief Medical Officer at Equipoint Medical, and I'm a consultant cardiologist at Barts Heart Center. Thanks for a great presentation. We're just about to close our Series A, hopefully, in the new year, and we have an executive chairman who's doing both positions. We totally appreciate what you've said, and we're fully aligned with that. But how do I go about recruiting the best chairman who's going to get us those 99x that we're after?
Speak to Roger.
Yeah.
First,
You can do that.
first question, talk to Roger. If he cannot do it, then find somebody that is really not just necessarily, you need to have the experience to understand what is the make, what is the experience. So it's not just a normal recruitment for a position in a company.
Yeah.
So you need to have that expertise, So which chairmans have you recruited recently? What is your track record? And have they been successful,
And I would say study your space. Look at the exits that have happened over the last decade, and look who's been on the board, and then network with that board to see who the driver was behind it. Because just because they're on the board doesn't mean they did anything, or just because they were the CEO, they may not have done anything. So you have to network and find out the influencers of that process.
Yeah, and write specifications for what you're expecting from that person.
Yeah.
What exact skill set, and this person will exist somewhere. There's several of them.
Each CEO requires a different chairman.
Okay, I think we can do one more question without getting kicked out.
So what's the ideal number on the board and the mix-up in terms of business acumen, scientific? Question number 1. And number 2, on terms of finding that talent, how much of that is networking inside versus going to an external firm, and whose point on identifying that talent?
Okay, let me hit the first one, and you guys hit the second one. The first one is the networking. Find your space, network to the right people. I highly recommend people with early stage experiences that have driven growth in an early stage company. The people from large cap, they speak nice, and they're very eloquent, but they may not be down and dirty and figure out all the nuances that need to happen. So go with smaller company experiences.
The number of people really depends on the company, right? Because the investor syndicate and how many representatives they have on the board will drive also how much independence you want to add to that. So it's very different.
Yeah.
But I would say in terms of representation, you want geography, you want operations versus investment experience, at least, right? Yeah.
And I think also on the VC side, when you have like 2 or 3 large investors, it's okay to have 2 or 3 large investors. If you have 20 investors, you can't have a representative for each one. It will be a nightmare. So try to also nail it down. Maybe 3, maximum 3 people that represent investors, 1 or 2 independents, the chairman and the CEO. That's it. And if you really need one of these independents, could be a medical person if you are really involved in the medical science. So it could be a medical person that brings that.
And I like experienced operators, those that have been a CEO before and seen all the challenges that lie ahead. They can also be a great confidant, mentor. And when you have a problem, they'll go to the rest of the board and say, you need to listen to the CEO. They're right, and here's why. And so they need somebody with that strength. Okay, so I think we're over our time. Thank you very much.